She actually talked to me, man.
Get out of here.
Oh, yeah.
I've really gotten into the bad habit of asking a huge amount of questions lately.
It's just a question between friends. You know?
She actually talked to me, man.
All right. Well, welcome to, it's been a few months, so excuse my hesitancy, but welcome to another episode of Five Great Questions, the podcast, which I still don't know how many episodes we're going to have, but every episode to me so far has been pretty special for different reasons. Sometimes the recipient seems to enjoy it more than I thought they would, and sometimes I enjoy it more than the recipient. So I have no guarantees about which way this is going to go, but with me this evening is my new friend, Wade Baynham from North Carolina, which I do have to say before we go any further, I can't lie to you, you do have a great NASCAR name. You do know that.
Yeah, and it's a Texas name too, because I went to high school in Texas, and people in Texas oftentimes have a last name for a first name, and so that's kind of typical.
Right. Yeah, I just maybe I've seen cars with my friends' kids too many times where I can just hear the voice saying, "Here comes Wade Baynham on the outside, putting his pedal down."
Yeah, right.
That's what I think of when I hear your name. So
yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say, my family on my dad's side, they ran moonshine, so they kind of were involved in the early NASCAR.
No way! Wow. Before Mountain Dew was bought by Pepsi, when it was a shine chaser, from what I understand.
Yeah, and it's not a history I know a ton about, but I did look up some relatives, and they did spend some time in jail, so I think it's the real deal.
Wow. Yeah, it's all that history out there is really interesting to me. I guess real briefly, and we can. I will tell those of you watching or listening. I'm going to guess it's about 50-50 split. Is that the small audience that I do get? Probably half of you are listening because you heard one or two of my episodes, you thought they were interesting, and the other half might have heard of Wade or his band, which was called The Basics. And so we're a little bit of it's a dual education, I think, tonight. But what I want to set us off for right at the beginning is one of the things that I think is so great about an interview like this is that I truly think it's one of the closest things we have to time traveling, because we get to go back to a time like the 90s and the coffeehouse scene, and it's right before the digital age, and there's a little bit that gets lost there before, in the analog to digital transition. There's a little bit that gets lost. And I will tell you truthfully, that's what caused me to contact you, is that an old friend from summer camp in Santa Cruz, actually the friend that introduced me to the Basics, because he was there at summer camp a year before I was, he mentioned something about the original album, the cassette tape that he had, and how he was kind of disappointed that some albums weren't, on digital. And I thought, oh yeah, that's true, I guess. And so I looked it up and I did a little research, and I found out, wait a second, the Basics might be one of those little analog to digital, matrix things where, things get lost. Like you mentioned, you weren't taking a lot of pictures. And I remember my friends at the time had the digital cameras, and they would get thrown away or lost or dropped off in the river. And so a lot of that was very common. So it's just kind of funny how we can look up, the Declaration of Independence on our phones right now. But
right.
If we try to find a band or a song from the early 90s, mid 90s, a lot of times that's harder to find.
It had to be pretty famous, right? I mean, some of the indie scene never got digitized on the internet.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, welcome to Five Great Questions, and thank you for being here. Thank you for Wade, 3 hours difference, agreeing to doing this tonight. And I have many more questions than just five, as you probably know, but we're going to start with just the basic five. So I asked this to everyone. Wade, did you receive the 5 questions that I sent you?
I did. And I want to say thank you very much, Alden, for having me, and I appreciate you looking me up. And it's been interesting to kind of pick my brain and to kind of consider your questions, which I think are good ones, and to also remember back, 30 years. That's a bit of an interesting journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes a smell or a song can trigger a memory, but when you're asked a direct question that you are not normally asked, you really have to kind of go through the files, you know.
That's right.
So,
And
okay, well, let's get,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, go, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, right. I agree with you, and I'm glad to get started.
I thought I don't have a lot of band shirts anymore, but I made this shirt about 2 weeks ago, and I thought you'd appreciate it. It's, you know who that is?
Is that an old Roger Miller shirt?
Well, I made it, but it's a Roger
Oh,
Miller shirt. I just designed it and made it a few weeks ago. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. No, I meant a picture of him. Yeah,
Yeah.
I realize the
Yeah.
shirt's new, but yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. That's
I
cool.
just I love Roger Miller, and I think he's one of the most underrated songwriters. So
Yeah.
um, okay. So Wade Baynham, you're in North Carolina. Real quick? Were you born and raised where you live
No,
now?
no. I've been here 26 years, but I never lived here. My dad's family is from South Carolina, right at the Georgia border, but I never lived there. I was born in Atlanta when my dad was in college there. He and my mom were married. He was a 5-year student because of football, so he had
Oh,
an injury and so had an extra year, and they got married that year. And then
wow.
my dad went and played in the NFL for a few years, and so we moved around to
Oh,
some
wow.
different cities because of that.
Wow, great. Well, that sounds like a country song right there.
Exactly.
So, um, okay. So when you started, I guess, can I assume you had one or two bands before the Basics, or groups that you played with, or?
Yeah, I had started writing songs in high school, and one thing my dad gave me was outside of my mom took some piano lessons with me
Hmm.
before high school, and then when I lived in high school, I was in Canada, and I had a music teacher that was incredible. He was a composer, he was a trumpet player and a pianist and a choir director and a music minister at church. And he was just one of these really very gifted, talented men. He
Hmm.
told me that when the band in Chicago came to town into Toronto, we lived outside of Toronto, he would go sit in with Chicago just to hang out and play with them on stage. So he kind of had
Wow.
that kind of ability. So what he gave me in terms of learning and experience were things that I then took through high school, or I was writing songs. My dad gave me an opportunity to record some of those songs back in the tape days, where I went into a real studio, with the glass and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
they actually pulled out a razor blade to cut edits and things like that in the tape. And so kind of that era. And then got to college and started working with some guys I'd known, one guy from high school, and then some guys I knew in college, and then was getting to know Kelly. She eventually joined us, and we had a band for a few years there, and then kind of as we
Was the
lost different members. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Was the band, did it have any different names at the beginning, or?
I think that band we called The Calling, which we liked that band The Call from California. Michael, do you remember The
Yeah.
Call? Yeah, and so I
I was
think
gonna say your voice kind of reminds me a little bit of the guy from The Call. Yeah.
Michael Ben had a voice that I think people would say was different than a lot of rock voices because it had like a thickness to it, kind of.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I met him once. We got to open for them one time many years later in San Francisco. But he wasn't doing that well that night, so I didn't get. He was ill, and so I had a chance to talk to him a long time. But he was a staggering musician. I mean, he was
Huh.
originally the lead guitar player, lost the bass player, so he switched over to bass and then played a fretless bass and played it like a lead guitar a lot of times. Like it was really
Yeah.
amazing. And then
Yeah.
just his voice was, yeah, I think it was different than a lot of rock voices, and I appreciated that. But then I also appreciated the complexity of his lyrics, and I would say it was people like him that inspired us, among many others.
Okay. So did you? Yeah. So because your family background by itself didn't put you on the music track, right?
Not at
It
all.
was more
No.
outside.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
My
It was
my
more
my
outside.
family was
Outside.
a sports thing, right? My dad played in the NFL and then ended up going to seminary, and so I was around church a
Yeah.
lot. And I think probably it was about seventh grade when he was working in a church. We were in Canada at that time, and someone just asked me. I mean, well, basically they told me you're the guitar player, and I'm like, well, I don't really play guitar, and they're like, you are the guitar player. So I had to learn kind of on the fly. It was playing camp songs and things like
Yeah.
that for a youth
Yeah.
group,
Three, four.
and
Yeah. Three, four chords. Yeah.
yeah, right, exactly. And so
Yeah.
but then I was also, since I was taking music lessons, I started writing songs, and so they weren't any good, but I was learning to try anyway. So
Yeah.
then when I got to
And were your
college, I just
early?
met. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, when you first started writing songs, were there an influence of a type or that you would gravitate towards as far as folk or rock or?
I mean, family wise, we didn't have many records in the house. I think we had like a couple Christian artists that most people haven't heard of, like an old guy like named Doug Oldham, which most people never even heard of. Then there was the
Hmm.
Kingston Trio, which I think I mentioned to you. And then there was Johnny Cash live at Folsom Prison. And I think those were kind of the main records. And then we had like some Disney stuff, and we had Sound of Music. So like, I fell in love with Julie Andrews' voice, as a kid and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
then more listening to the radio. I think my dad introduced me to Neil Diamond when I was probably, oh man, I don't know, 11 or 12. I think that was the first concert I ever went to, was a Neil Diamond concert with my dad. But it
Wow.
was
That's a
kind of in
great
his,
first
like,
concert.
he was wearing kind of the Fat Elvis clothes. I mean, he wasn't fat, but he was wearing that outfit, like the big
Yeah.
collars and the white jumpsuit and all that stuff. So it was really
Yeah.
different than the Neil Diamond who had written the more folky, edgier kind of stuff earlier in his career.
Yeah.
And I think he tried to get back to that with Ruben when they did a project together much later. But I kind of knew
Right.
him at a time when, chest hair and gold chains and all that kind of stuff. So that was not, I didn't see myself in that. So it was kind of a weird mixture of things. And then I probably was around so many Christian groups in church that I started to listen to some of the stuff that was becoming popular from some of the Jesus movement, but like Keith Green, and
Yeah.
then started to learn a little bit of Randy Stonehill and
Yeah.
uh, you know Larry Norman and some of those old Jesus people kind of guys from the West Coast.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. Did you see the Jesus Revolution movie?
I did not. No, I
Oh,
saw the preview, but I haven't seen it.
I would recommend it actually. I was expecting a little more a little more corny, but it actually is it's pretty well done. I would recommend it.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool.
Okay. So so when you started getting together as what would become the Basics, which is you and Kelly and Drew, I mean at the very
Right.
beginning or
Yeah,
okay.
and then a guy who'd been in the Calling, was the bass player and rhythm guitar player with us named Dave Stubbs, and Dave was who's on the cover of Will You. So it's Kelly and me and Dave Stubbs on that cover, but Drew had
Okay.
been along that whole time, and was beginning to write songs with us and stuff like that. And so Dave ended up going to grad school, and so when we went to When I Closed My Eyes, it was already gone. And it was really Drew and Kelly and I that were working on stuff, and then there was a drummer named Todd Dorman who worked with us on just the drums for that record, and then worked with us more on Weight and Glory.
Okay. Well, so I know people, the audience will give me a hard time because it took me a long time to get to the question one. But question one is, how did you know when you had a sound as the bass, as those three people? How did you know when you had a sound other than just the other songs that you were hearing at the time in coffee houses or at youth group events? Was it the way your voices worked together, or was it a songwriting? Was there one song that maybe it just flowed out that was the cause?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the fact that Kelly and I had been singing together from my freshman year, her sophomore year in college, and we both were in a cappella groups that did some joint concerts together at Stanford. So
Hmm.
we knew each other from that, and we'd seen each other sing. And then I just asked if she wanted to do an open mic coffee house thing with me. And I mean, she joked a lot about kind of the cheesy line of "let's see if voices blend," but we really did do that. And then we played that
Yeah.
coffee house gig, and then she went overseas for a couple quarters, but we were writing back and forth. And then when she came back, we were in a musical Godspell together. And Dave Stubbs, the bass player, was in a musical too with us. So the three of us were in that, and then we just started sort of practicing together. And that band, The Calling, was those. And then people kept going away to grad school or doing other things, and so it became a joke, like it's always back to the basics of just the three of us or the four of us or whatever. And so then that name, we kept looking for names and kind of stuck as a joke, and then we were stuck with it. So we had started to just play open mics and coffee houses in the area, and we're continuing to try to write songs. And I think it was really, honestly, just we had acoustic guitars. I hadn't played any electric. Dave had played bass and acoustic guitar, and he played piano too. I played piano, but in that sort of format, it was much easier to bring an acoustic guitar into a coffee house. And so
Right.
that's kind of just what we did. And then I remember seeing the Indigo Girls at the Stanford Coffee House, and it was their second record, but it was their first big major label release that had Closer to Fine on it. Is on Epic Records, and it was just called Indigo Girls. And we saw them from like 10 feet away, and Kelly and I watched them, and I remember looking out of that room and going, I could do that. I want to do that. And I mean, obviously, I never had a hit like Closer to Fine, and they're great musicians, but I just meant there was something about acoustic guitars and two people and blending and writing lyrics that had more going on than pop songs at the time, or a lot of pop songs, period. And so I was like, wow, I don't know if this is a movement or anything. I just liked it. And so we tried to have our next thing that became Will You, became a demo, and then Will You. We tried to just do that thing of kind of couple voices and guitars.
Huh. Well, that's a good answer actually, because it's true, but it's also very organic and just very natural. It's almost too simple, because if someone had to guess, you would say, oh, maybe they went to college together and then they started playing around and then they went and saw the Indigo Girls at a coffee house, and you would think, wait, could it really be that easy?
Well, right, and we also saw an artist named Peter Himmelman at that same coffee house, who was on Epic as well, and he's done a number of different things. He did some scoring for some shows like a show called Judging Amy. He did all the scoring for that, but he also did
Okay.
some scoring for the show Bones, their first few seasons. But
Yeah.
before that, he had a record deal with Epic, and I just loved songwriting. And he's I don't know if he still is, but at that time he was an Orthodox Jew. He's Bob Dylan's son-in-law, and so he had some
Oh,
pretty big shoes still to try to write songs as a singer-songwriter. But he
yeah.
played really good acoustic guitar. He was hilarious in concert. But I actually heard a song that was one of the most influential songs I'd ever heard to that time in my life that he wrote called Impermanent Things. And I was driving
Hmm.
along and listened to the radio, and I heard it. And I actually pulled over and went right into Tower Records and bought his record called Peter Himmelman. And
Nice. I'm gonna write it down.
yeah, his last name is Himmelman. And
Yeah.
that record I think was just called Peter Himmelman. And he had been, for people, anyone who knows the Midwest, he had been in a famous band out of the St. Paul, Minneapolis area called Sussman Lawrence. And I know some people who
Hmm.
live there and have lived there years, and they're like, oh man, Sussman Lawrence was huge, but they never got a record deal. And that was a
Yeah.
huge heartbreak for him. And then he got a record deal finally for himself. But he just never had huge hits, but he was very influential to us as the Basics.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So well, it's funny, all the Southern connections, and yet it seems that you all three met and started a band at a at a West Coast university called Stanford.
That's right.
Yeah.
A
Okay.
junior university.
Uh, yeah, that's right. Where my niece is going right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, okay. So so who named the band? Oh, yeah. The band name sort of just came organically. Okay. Um, Well, let's do what I was hoping to do at the very beginning. One of the good ideas is the whole idea of the folk revival in the '90s. I think it's so fascinating for a lot of reasons. There were similarities to the '60s in the '90s. Um, a lot of music, especially in the first part of a decade, is a reaction to the way the last decade ended. That's not hard to see. So we can kind of see musically, I think, how people wanted to be stripped down. And um, I actually, little side trivia note, I was at one of the first acoustic concerts from a rock band in San Francisco, and no one no one would link that band to the MTV acoustic, but that is really how it started. It was that, I don't know if you remember the club called Slim's in San
Yeah,
Francisco.
of course, of course.
Yeah. So Slim's had a little acoustic show in 1990 with a rock band Tesla from Sacramento, and we thought it was great. They played some of their hits. They played some good cover songs. They played some Grateful Dead and some Creedence. But 6 months later, MTV started doing acoustic, and MTV started doing and then everybody had to do the acoustic thing. It didn't matter how big your band was. It didn't matter how loud your guitars were. You had to strip it down, and everyone wanted to see you go acoustic.
That's right. That was huge.
So, yeah, and it was just huge. So, um, I mean, we sort of covered it a little bit, but I guess just from you outside of the basics, just you personally, what what are your favorite memories of the what were not your memories, sorry. What were your favorite parts of being in folk music in the 90s?
Right. We knew kind of from our childhoods, you know, some things that were acoustic, like popular stuff like John Denver, or we knew some of the like some of the acoustic Jackson Brown or Crosby, Stills and Nash, things like that. And
Yeah.
um so that was in our vocabulary, but we weren't trying to necessarily imitate just folk. It's just that we didn't have a larger band because we were playing venues that, like I said, we'd started going to open mics and we'd started playing coffee houses, and there wasn't as much room to have more going on. It was really
Right.
more simple, and that worked for us because we wanted to focus on our songwriting and we wanted to focus on songs that had meaning and purpose. And for us, we related to singer songwriters who, even if their records had more production on them, their shows were oftentimes, simpler, stripped down. And when I first saw, Indigo Girls, again, their record has a lot more on it. It's more produced, but in the coffee house, there's just the two of them. When I saw Peter Himmelman
Right.
at that Stanford coffee house a few months later, it was just him, just by himself, with playing some piano and some guitar. He ended up having a pretty big band, and I saw them play at Slim's, and it was great. But what I fell in love with was just that simpler thing of sort of seeing a person tell some more personal stories, how they wrote something, what was behind the music. And so even though that became a thing on MTV, behind the music, we really were trying to do that all the time anyway. Um,
Right.
and so it really was like, um, music had come alongside us in sort of our listening in ways that cared for us. And so we thought, if we can bring that type of care to people with some vulnerability, that's what we want to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And, and I think that's what a lot of people appreciated, and enjoyed. And I think, you know, uh, it's well known that, if things happen if things hit you at a different age, they're not going to hit you the same. For me being 20 years old, 21 in the early 90s, I was just at that time where, maybe I wasn't going to a lot of bars, but it was fun to go to a coffee shop and order maybe a different kind of drink than I would order, even if didn't matter if it wasn't alcoholic. It was, oh, there's some cushy chairs and there's a couple girls that I've never seen from this part of town. And, and you might hear somebody that, drove all night from Portland to share you his songs, and his
Yeah.
his guitar might say Woody Guthrie on it or whatever, and you all of a sudden you thought, well, maybe I'm getting like a stream of consciousness from a different stream, because I'm not just listening to album rock radio or folk radio or any radio.
Right.
So I think a lot of us appreciated that communication, almost like when you see like a Good Morning Vietnam and you think of the soldiers listening to a radio station that is just a pirate radio, to them. And I think maybe that for those of us that, I loved a lot of the grunge bands, but something about it, I just knew that it wasn't 100% me. I appreciated a lot of the songs, but I wasn't that angry. I had been through I had a divorce, and there were things that I wasn't happy about, but I didn't want to spend my whole life just being that angry. And so I think folk for me at least, was in the 90s, was a way to explore some deeper issues without, just Nine Inch Nails all the time,
Right, right. And I mean, I think you've used that word folk, which I really appreciate and understand. I think we thought of ourselves as singer songwriters,
Yeah.
meaning that, there'd been that period in music, before the 60s and even through some of the 60s, where the singers did not write their songs. That was not okay. That was not going to happen.
Right.
And so,
Right.
probably, if there's a tradition we were feeling like maybe we were part of, in a tiny little way, it was singer songwriters, people who
Yeah.
were performing what they wrote.
Yeah. 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 No, that's true too. And as I've looked through my CD case, it doesn't matter what I say I like, it does tell a lot about you. And most of them in there are singer songwriters. Most of the bands that I have, even like a Tom Petty, which is one of my favorite ever. Well, he's a singer songwriter, and he fought and almost broke up the band because they told him, "Hey, you've got to let other guys write." And he's like, "I'm sorry, this is what I'm doing. I'm the singer and the songwriter." So, well, that's a good transition to the next question, which is the coffee house scene in the 90s. Take us back to Actually, here's a good question. Your first, after you did that open mic with Kelly, where you thought maybe we've got something here, what was your first coffee house concert as the Basics?
That's a good question. I don't remember the name of it. It was a little place in Palo Alto. It was downtown. It's not there anymore. I mean, music kind of got run out of Palo Alto for a number of different reasons, but it was small enough to be like a little counter, a little deli counter, coffee counter, and then maybe 4 or 5 tables. And I just remember going in and you know, doing a couple covers and some originals, and I think we played 5 or 6 songs, and I just remember people were really kind and applauded, and they asked, they were like, you guys can come back, and um so I think we just felt like, yeah, that felt right, that felt like it went pretty well, and we ought to keep working on this. um and it wasn't too long before we had another friend from Stanford who was performing in the area, who was performing at a place in Palo Alto that was called at the time Café Montmartre, like in France. And the owner wanted live music on the weekend, but he wanted us to play 3-hour shows, and so it wasn't right after that because David left by this time, and we were doing things like playing intervarsity groups, and we were playing shows at noon on college campuses, and we were doing wherever we could play. But then after a year or two, we started playing downtown Palo Alto, and so that for us was pretty formative because we had to play for 3 hours, and that meant like writing and learning covers, and it's challenging to play for 3 hours. So I think that was very formative. There was a place in downtown San Francisco. I think it was called, started with an L. What was it called? In my mind, it's like Leo's or something, but it wasn't it. But it was the place where the Kingston Trio got their start, and the owner actually booked us, and we played there for probably a year and a half, like once a month, maybe 2 years. And he kept saying, "Hey, I want to have you guys be my next band that I break because I helped break the Kingston Trio, and you guys remind me of them, and I love what you're doing." And it was funny because we had one guy that was drunk every time we were there, and he was so nice. And he listened to us for a while at the bar, but then after we kept playing there, he started coming up and singing along like right in front of us. And this is a tight place. Like we could barely get the mixer in there, barely get our speakers in there, and it'd always be foggy and cold, And this guy he started yelling at the crowd if they were talking, and he'd be like, shut the F up, like listen to these people. And it got to be where we thought he was going to fall on us sometimes because, he was just so drunk. But he was so sincere and so like, you got to listen to this. And it was experiences like that I think kept us going, kept us coming back.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good one. And so let's connect the dots for the audience who doesn't know. I went to a BMX race down in Santa Clara in September of 93. And I met a guy who just turned to me on the starting gate of the BMX track, just turned right to me and said, do you know Jesus? And I said, well, yeah, but, we've got a race to run. And he said, have you ever heard of Camp Maymac? And the Camp Maymac was, a mile away from Mount Hermon up in Felton.
Yeah.
And that next summer, I took over as the BMX director for the summer and for 3 summers in a row. And so when I came to Felton, it would have been, May of 94. that's when I found the little Mountain Roasters coffee shop, and that's when I heard about the basics. So tell me about your experience with Mountain Roasters in Felton.
Yeah, so I'm glad you found us there. We had in college been at Mount Hermon for a number of retreats, and um, Kelly and I had sung a number of times at Mount Hermon for different retreats, and then I think did little mini concerts, the two of us, things like that, with the college group that was there. Nothing that was advertised or that people knew about. So as we started performing more around the Bay Area, there were just some people that were like, "Hey, one of the things you ought to do is send your press kit or whatever over to the Mountain Roasting Company because they have, concerts, and it's a cool place because people come from that area and they like to listen. It's not going to be just people talking; like people actually want to listen." And
Yeah.
the owner was like a lot of owners where they expected us to play and no one to really listen. Um, but when they saw people coming, because we would put stuff on our mailing list, and I have to say, Kelly and this woman named Carl Huffman, who did booking with us and sales with us, they really worked hard. I mean, really hard to get us into a lot of places. And they would basically start with like, okay, if you'll just have us and you can see how many people we bring in, then if you just have us once, just give us a try. And a lot of owners were
Yeah.
very nervous and like, I don't know, you guys might actually run more people off than help and things like that. But he really fell in love with us, and just I mean it was so great to be able to play there. And I've met quite a few people over the years that said, hey, I saw you there because I was at a camp, I was at whatever camp around the area, and
Yeah.
I came in and started coming regularly to your shows. And
Well,
that was just, it was a great gift to have people like yourself
yeah.
coming and appreciating what we were doing.
Yeah. And the little cassette tape that you would send out at the time, was it just like 5 songs, or what was it?
Well, no, I think by that time you said 94, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So by that time we had Will You, which is our first one, which is on cassette but I think that time it was a CD. Then we had When I Close My
Oh,
Eyes,
that's
which was cassette and CD. Then we had Wait in Glory by that time, which was a cassette and a CD. Um, and I
but what
think,
but I mean, but in your press kit that you would send out just to
oh,
coffee shops, what album or what group, or did you, like, I guess what I mean is, did you create a little mix for coffee shops or coffee houses?
no, I mean, by that point, we were just sending out an actual cassette of one of the records, and we would just tell
Okay.
people. Sometimes we'd send two
Yeah.
of them, and we would just tell people, listen to these tracks. And then, we would just talk about, in the press kit, it would say where we'd played, and, we had quotes from people. We had some quotes from local media. And I think by 94, no, it was later in 94 that we put Haven Road, and then even K-Fog
Yeah.
started to play one of our songs off Haven Road. So that really helped in
Oh,
a few doors.
yeah. Well, and that's another of my side questions was, yeah, because Haven Road was, I think, the first one I bought on CD. Um, and album covers do make a difference. I remember, because I was working when I was not at summer camp. My other job was working at a Tower Records knockoff up in Sonoma, called Rainbow Records.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember seeing the Haven Road cover, and from 5 feet away, it looked like it might be like the latest Gin Blossoms or something. It wasn't. It didn't look like, oh, they're just a coffee house band, or they're just a Christian band, or whatever. It was looked like, okay, here's a new kind of an alt rock or a folk rock or indie rock, whatever. And it does make a difference, just the visual.
And yeah,
Um,
I appreciate you saying
yeah,
that.
yeah. Oh, that's right. Did you have any? So we know that. A few coffee houses were really kind to you. What about radio stations?
Yeah, we didn't get much radio airplay, but it was so amazing when KFOG, which at the time was like the biggest adult contemporary station in the country, um,
Yeah.
was willing to play. I think they played "Walking in Heartland" for a while, especially on the
Oh yeah.
weekends. And
Yeah.
that was like crazy to us because I think I can't remember what I was doing, but Kelly had gone in to meet one of the DJs who was willing to take our press kit, and she basically walked Kelly into a room that was like, I don't know, 12 by 15. It was like an office. And Kelly said there were CDs from the floor to her waist, just in piles around that
Oh,
office. And
of
she looked at
samples
Kelly
and
and she said, I got these this week. And these are people that want me to play their stuff. And so Kelly was like, got it, you know? At least that's how I remember the
yeah,
story. And so we just thought,
yeah.
well, that's that. Like, she was really nice. She's like, I like your record, but this is what you're up against. And so it was just
Wow.
like, well, we'll never hear it. So then we just had people calling us one, I think Sunday morning going, you guys are on KFOG. And it was like, what? And I think we had missed it, but people just started telling us, yeah, I'm hearing you. And so it was really random. College radio stations would play us, and it just we never knew. Like no one was giving us a heads up. We would just hear later, usually,
Yeah.
that people heard us.
And I leads to one of my other side questions was, do you feel looking back now, because it's easier when you look back, was that moment with KFOG and with the coffee houses and with, the albums were coming more regularly, was that what you would kind of consider a peak or?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of I think this relates to one of your other questions about success. I think that's probably your last question, but I one thing I've noticed thinking back about that time over the years is that there was a success agenda that I think we all felt, and I can't speak for Drew or Kelly or any of the other guys, but we did talk about it. I remember quite a few conversations about the fact that this needed to become a major record label deal kind of band. Like that had to happen for us to
Yeah,
feel like the money, the time, the effort was worth it.
was worth it.
And so we got different deals. We had management deals. We had other things where people were courting us, and they just weren't very good deals. They just didn't work out very well in terms of it wasn't going to be beneficial to us financially. And when we tried to get a booking agent, the booking agent would look at our schedule and then say, can I call you about how you get all these bookings? Because I'm a professional booking agent and I can't get my people, signed people, I can't get them in the places you're playing. And so while that was a great compliment to Carla and to Kelly and their hard work, it was not affirming of this success vision that we had. It felt like, when is someone going to do this stuff for us? And so by the time we
Yeah,
got through 94, then 95, and into 96, we were so tired because we had been hauling gear all from Seattle to San Diego, regularly. And,
yeah,
it was exhausting. And I think we just kept thinking, gosh, one of these things has to be the break that gives us a chance to have some other people help us so we're not hauling our own
yeah.
speakers and wrapping our own cables every night.
And where were you living at the time? In Palo Alto or in Bay Area
Redwood
somewhere?
City. Redwood City,
In
yeah.
Redwood City. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then a kind of follow up to that question is, um, was there any, you know, almost meetings with, with the agent that you wanted, or the producer that you knew was at another concert and you almost missed him or her? Was there any of those moments that kind of slipped through, or?
Well, it was weird because I think I mentioned to you when we were chatting before this that we were in this weird in between where um, we were considered too Christian by some secular or mainstream labels, and then we were considered not Christian enough for kind of national Christian labels. So there was a
Yeah.
time, even with Will You, where someone gave our some songs from Will You. It actually was demo. It's like a demo before Will You was finalized to A&M Records in LA. And so a guy who was a talent scout for A&M said, "Come on down and we'll talk." So we got in the car, we drove to LA, and we got there, and I just remember this big cutout in the hallway of A&M Records. It was right in Hollywood. In the they were housed at the time in the old Charlie Chaplin studios right there in Hollywood. And I remember Janet Jackson standing there as a life-size cutout, trying to hand me her latest video. And I just remember like, wow, this is A&M Records. Like, so we
Yeah.
walked in and met with him, and he's like, you guys are really talented. I just, you're not what A&M needs, but let me pass you along to what at that time was a division of Myrrh Records, and it was being distributed by A&M. So it was like who handled Amy Grant's stuff at the time, but she was having some bigger hits like Baby Baby and some of that stuff, and
Yeah.
so. Um, A&M had taken over her distribution, even though she had been a part of Myrrh Records, which was a part of Word Records, but it was their LA division. And so there was a producer and an A&R guy, which talent scout guy named Dan Postema, who was working for Myrrh at the time, but he was he had the money together to start a label of people that were Christians, but were not overtly kind of Christian music. And so we
Yeah.
had several conversations for a few months where after that meeting at A&M where he said, I'm going to do the label. I'm signing two bands. I'm signing Buddy and Julie Miller, who went on to win Grammys and do all kinds of stuff. Buddy Miller is hugely famous, and his wife Julie wrote a ton of songs. And anyway, he's like, I'm signing them, and then I'm signing the Basics. The two of you are going to be my first push. And so we were like, oh my gosh, this is our first demo, our first record. Like, this is going somewhere. Um,
Yeah.
and he called. No, we had to call him because we hadn't heard from him in a couple of weeks. And he said, Word just got bought by Thomas Nelson, the Bible publisher, and they're killing Myrrh. They're cutting the whole project. They think LA is too secular. It's all, crazy people out
Oh,
there. We want everyone to come back to LA. So he's like, I barely have a job. I don't have any budget. I had to let Buddy and Julie go. And it was great for them. Buddy and Julie went on and signed with a San Francisco label and won Grammys and, did all that stuff. And for us, it just didn't work out that way.
yeah. Oh, so that, so that your your what if moment came really early, actually,
And then we
really
had
early.
more.
Wow.
Yeah, we had more after that. I remember
Yeah.
being in
Now,
LA. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 no. Yeah. More stories.
Oh,
Yeah.
just one more. I remember we were sitting. We played a show. A guy who was a manager for the famous singer Pat Boone. Debbie Boone's father, who had had all those hits in the Elvis era. And
Yeah.
at that time in the '90s, I don't know if you remember this, but they put out a record of him singing heavy metal lyrics as Pat Boone, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this manager had done that project, and I remember sitting outside with him. I don't remember his name, but he had like the black turtleneck, and he was kind of real intimidating, and he was trying to tell me like, this is what we're going to do with your band, and we're going to change all these things. We're going to mess all this, we're going to mess around with it like all those guys wanted to do, which was always like, either you're going to be the singer or she's going to be the singer, or we're going to bring in different players. It's like they always do with bands. And,
Yeah.
I was like, so, well, this is what we do. And I was like, this is what we want to do. And this is what we've worked on for years. So, this is what we do. You can either appreciate what we're doing or not. But like, I'm not wearing a short skirt, and Kelly's not wearing a short skirt. And so, it's like if whatever you want, like that's not what if you didn't like what we're doing tonight. And then he basically he kind of called me a liar in terms of like saying, you can't be playing as many shows as you're playing and stuff like that. Like, it's just impossible. And
Huh.
it was just like, okay, bye. And so, it's one of those things where he's there in the crowd. We knew he's there. We're all excited. We didn't like Pat Boone, but it's like, whatever. This is going to possibly be another chance. And then it just was like, no. And so
Yeah.
it was just that sort of thing would feel so close, and then it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, and yet the meaningful times, I'm sure there were many at 11 o'clock at night at the Felton coffeehouse, where you know where the lights are down and you guys, you get into your final song, and it's one of the heavier ones or something, and you can hear everyone's just a pin drop. I don't know. I can't help but thinking that those are priceless memories.
Oh no, that they are, and that's why if I speak to your last question about success here, I don't want to get out of order, but since you brought
No,
it
it's
up, I
okay.
would
Go
say,
for it. Yeah.
That's been the biggest thing I learned, was that once we weren't the basics anymore. Well, Kelly and I did a couple records, just the two of us, when we moved to North Carolina, but we didn't tour on those records, and people didn't really get a chance to come out to shows. And what I realized is I'd been producing other bands since about 96 or 7. I'd been starting to work with some people, and I just realized that we had great fans. We had people who loved our music. I mean, I remember meeting a guy who said, I just got back from backpacking around the world, and I was in Africa for a lot of the time, and I only had 2 CDs, and When I Closed My Eyes was one of them. And I just want you to know that, like, I was actually the guy stuck on the desert island, and I took one of your CDs as one of 2 that I could listen to. And
Yeah.
so I know that it's colloquial, it's just one guy, but I remember thinking, hey, that's not actually small. That's a big deal, that it
Yeah.
mattered enough to you to want to have that as one of your only things to remember home and to remember what mattered to you. And as I started talking to other musicians, and as I worked with other musicians, I began to realize how fortunate we were that people like yourself came and supported what we did and liked it and sung along and actually knew the lyrics. And I mean, it was a great gift.
Yeah. Yeah. And I probably, well, if you do get a chance to watch the BMX movie that I made, it's on Amazon. It's called 30 Bikes. There's
Yeah,
some similarities there, and you'll see when you watch,
I look
because
forward to that.
it's a tiny BMX company that, yeah, it just went back on Amazon last week. It was off for a few months. My distributor went bankrupt. There's all the normal Hollywood stuff, But
Right.
so now I'm my own distributor, but it's back on Amazon. But you'll laugh at the similarities as far as the impact that it had on people, but it was a small amount of people. So, and yeah, and then I guess that the second part of that question is, everyone always loves to ask, like, well, what would you tell the younger you? But a related question is, what did success mean to you in 1990 or 92, 94, whatever? What did success mean to you then? And what does it mean to you now? Not how do you look back at your time, but what does it mean to you right this moment?
Yeah, one of the things that over the years has been helpful was there was an engineer that mixed Weight and Glory, most of Weight and Glory, and then he mixed Haven Road, and he was a Nashville engineer named Russ Long, and he worked a long number of years with Steve Taylor, and they worked together on things like the Newsboys and things like that. And we didn't really fit with the music that they worked on, but we had played a show with an artist named Kim Hill, and he was the sound guy for her that night. And so we got to know him because they were playing through our sound system. And so then he came out and mixed some stuff for us. And then for Haven Road, we went to Nashville and we mixed at his studio. And one of the things he said to us along the way was, I don't care who I've worked with, none of you guys ever sell enough records. And he said, I don't care if you have platinum records and millions of sold, or whether it's you guys playing in coffee houses, none of you have sold enough records. And I think what I couldn't quite understand at the time was he was saying, you need to appreciate where you are. And I think that's probably what I would say about what I think about success now is, have I been able to work on my craft? Yeah. I mean, now I'm 58 and I've been able to work on my craft for, nearly 40 years. Well, I mean, I was actually writing songs before that. So I've been writing songs and working in the studio for more than 40 years. And I've had a chance to connect with and help and come alongside so many people. And it was that experience of a lot of those heartaches and a lot of those difficult studio experiences and difficult band experiences, with personnel changes and things like that, that have given me, I would say, a chance to actually partner and even, I would say, mentor some people. And at that time, we talked constantly about wishing we had a mentor and just not feeling like
Yeah.
we could find one.
Yeah, sometimes when you're kind of blazing your own trail, mentors are the last things that show up, it seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So um so basically what you're doing now is producing music full time, or?
Yeah, I do a mixture of things like a lot of us. I teach lessons, I produce, I still write and make my own records, which are out, on Amazon and Spotify and, stuff like that, just under my name, under Wade Baynham.
Okay.
Bandcamp is, there's wadebaynham.bandcamp.com is a site I like
Okay.
because I get to write more about what I'm doing and why I've put out the music I've put out. And
Hmm.
my wife, Denise, I've been remarried for 17 years. Denise is a school teacher, but also a photographer, and she's done a lot of work with graphic work on that. She's also a partner in terms of encouragement, in terms of writing and talking about ideas and album concepts and things like that. So that's been a huge gift. But I I think because Denise is a teacher and has been a lifelong teacher, that's encouraged me to do some of the music teaching I do. It's encouraged me to
Sure.
do some of the producing I've done where, um, when you do studio work, one of the times I realized I didn't want to do full-time studio work because it meant that you had to do anything that walked in the door. So that meant someone wants to read a
Yeah.
poem or someone wants to do a flute recital. And that's also great. And I've done all that. And I don't knock that. I mean, I'm glad I could do that. But it was getting tiresome to do just that. So I wanted more interaction with people. So that's why I've loved teaching lessons. I've done sound consulting. There was a 7-year period about where I was a pastor in the area where I was
Oh,
basically a pastor for arts and worship, and I brought in professional musicians to play with me all the time, and we would tell their story, talk about their music. We then would bring in some, painters. We'd bring in some poets. We'd bring some things like that, and so like that felt like I got a chance to sort of teach a congregation about the life of an artist, and they wanted me to do that, and I felt like that was a gift to do that. So it's always been around this thing of the song and the message, and how can I bring music to people in a way where they feel like it's enriched their lives somehow, because that's still fundamental to me, is that music, there's a lot of difficulty in my family growing up, a lot of internal conflict stuff. And music was one of the things that helped me feel less alone.
hmm. Hmm. Yeah, well, there's a lot there. Do you have siblings?
I have three younger siblings.
Three younger siblings. Wow. Okay. um, okay. Well, I'm almost done with my questions. But I was going to ask you. You've answered a few of them just naturally, which is actually better, so I can check them off. So the best place people can go is wadebaynham.bandcamp.com, and they can find your basics to now. And then a few of the basics albums are on Spotify and Apple and all the usual. Yeah.
Right. Bandcamp is just my personal stuff. There's no basic stuff
Yeah.
on there. So basic stuff is going to be more on Amazon and a couple of things like that. Like that, I can't remember. I know the Grow record from 2004 or 5, 2004 is um, on streaming. It's on some of the streaming sites. And then I can't remember about Cosmic Neighborhood. Um, but then in terms of my stuff, yes, it's all there, and it's been the last 14 or 15 years of my stuff is up there.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, like
And
I said,
you
it's
did
also on
mention,
Spotify and Amazon and Apple
yeah,
Music.
yeah, yeah. And you did mention one of my questions from the very beginning actually was you did mention early on in your coffeehouse sessions, you did covers, but yet none of the basics albums have a cover on them, if I'm correct.
No.
So what's if you could go back in time and add a cover, what's one cover that you think you guys just nailed and you wish you could um, you wish would have been on an album?
We
Or
did.
just you think that you guys played it to practice or whatever.
Oh no, we played covers in shows quite a bit. We just didn't put them on records.
Okay.
And we didn't. We did on the Christmas record, which is called Canticle of the Turning. We put some covers on
Oh,
that.
oh
But
yeah, that's
we let's see. I would say a signature one for us. We did "Closer to Find," that Indigo Girls song.
hmm,
And we also did a song by Sean Colvin, who is an artist, a Grammy winner that we loved, and I loved her producer John Leventhal. I thought his production was incredible.
yeah.
And he's married to Roseanne Cash now, Johnny Cash's daughter, but he's always been amazing. And she
Which
had a
song was
song on
that?
her first record from '89, and the song was called "Diamond in the Rough," and we did a cover of that I really like.
You really like? Okay.
Yeah, we also did Tom Petty's song, but we did the Linda Ronstadt version. We did that cover a lot. What was it called? Oh,
Oh, the woman in love.
the waiting is the hardest part.
Oh, the waiting is the hardest part. Yeah,
You know, and so we did that
yeah,
song.
yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite Petty songs. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
Oh,
we
that's
did quite
great.
a few covers, but just didn't put them on records. Then when I worked for this church, part of my job was to try to introduce them to music. So one of the things that I did was bring music that was considered secular, but that thematically fit with what our conversation topic was that week in church. And so that's part of why I worked with studio players is they had to learn material like on the spot in 15, 20 minutes and then present it. So we played a
Yeah.
ton of covers. And so then when I started putting out records of my own, a lot of people had asked me for those covers. So I put more covers on my stuff because of how many I'd done in those years working for the church.
Oh, right, right, right. Yeah. Let me. I want to read these. I should have had these already written up, but I did want to read you the lyrics real quick to the. Since I have the Roger Miller shirt, and this is actually a good way to wrap up. Um, oh, if so, if I do once I edit this, if I do an outro, what song do you want me to go out to? I'm
Oh,
thinking of a classic like "It's All Right"
sure. I mean,
or
it's all
"Rockin' in
right.
Heartland."
Yeah, It's All Right was written by, we oftentimes ended shows with It's All Right, and it was written by a guy who had been a producer and a guy who recorded us on Will You When I Close My Eyes and Wait in Glory, and his name was Tom Lillo, Lillo. And Tom
That
wrote
sounds okay.
Tom wrote
Oh,
"It's All
great.
Right,"
Okay.
and so
He wrote
yeah,
it. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Well, oh, that's right. Okay, sorry. This is the last question, I promise. Um, because I have made a few documentary films, and one of the things I love to do is if I'm driving and I get some new music or, an indie band or something, sometimes it's at a coffee house, even still, and I grab the CD and I'm thinking of where it could fit into a movie, and there are a couple of your songs. Were there any of your songs that you thought would have been good for a movie? I'm thinking of a couple.
Well, interestingly, we wrote several songs for a short film that premiered at the First Look Festival in LA because a USC film student had gone to Stanford and really liked our stuff, and so those songs ended up on the Cosmic Neighborhood record. But
Oh,
one of
wow.
them was called Rain, one was called Nevada Sky, one is called
Yeah.
uh, what was the other? See, I think there were four. I'd have to look
Leaving
back at the.
Seattle, because that was the one that Leaving Seattle was the one that when I first heard that I was like, oh, come on, that belongs in a movie. Like there's a character, you know, yeah, there's an old Chevy Nova and there's a rainy window and there's a reflection on her face, like the whole thing, you know.
Yeah, so interesting that you say that because at that time we had just moved to North Carolina and we had our old drummer Bobby Metcalf play on some of the songs, but then we had new songs that didn't have drums, and so we had a guy who was from this area who'd gone to North Carolina Central University. Their music program is amazing, and his name was Iaji Hamden, and he came and I'd never worked with him, but a friend had worked with him, and he played the songs, a number of the songs on Cosmic Neighborhood, and that was his comment about some of our songs was like, these sound
Huh.
like movie soundtracks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Huh, that's interesting. What's the short film called? Do you remember?
I think it was called Fire.
Fire. Okay. Huh. Okay. So I just love these lyrics. This is called Where Have All the Average People Gone by Roger Miller. And I just think you'll relate. So it says, the people in the city call me country because of how I walk and talk and smile. But I don't mind them laughing in the city, but the country folks, they all think I'm citified. The fighting men, they say that I'm a coward because I never push no one around. But gentle people call me troublemaker because I'll always fight and stand my ground. Funny, I don't fit. Where have all the average people gone? Some pious people point and call me sinner because to them I've never seen the light. Other folks think of me as a preacher, but really I'm just doing what I think is right. The wealthy people think that I am a hobo, lean and hungry, writing mournful songs. And the poor people think I am a rich man, but really I'm just trying to get along. It's funny, I don't fit. Tell me where have all the average people gone?
Yeah,
I just think
that's
it's really
very insightful
nails
into that
a
in
lot of
between
your
place. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think as we get through life, we find that there are a lot more of us in the in-between place than we gave each other credit and grace for when we were growing up. We all wanted to be, well, like the producer said, there's never enough records sold, you know. And if you have a big house, well, then you also have big security, and then you also have big anxiety at night, and you have a big landscaping bill and whatever. So everything comes with a cost. And I think if I was going to tell the younger me, I would probably say the same thing, that um, this life is a gift, whether it lasts 10 years or 100. And you better love what you're doing today, because there's no guarantee what's going to happen. And the thing that you thought you were seeking after, once you get it, number one, it might disappear out of your hands. It might just disappear. But also you might get it and go, wow, why was I chasing this so hard?
I completely agree. And I think that ability to say in my prayers, kind of Jesus's prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. not my will. I don't know how this is going to work. I don't even want to do it, but your will. And I think it's way easier to say that word, hey, your will. But I do think will has had a lot to do with my journey, because there was a part of my journey where I would have said, I thought I wanted to follow God, but I didn't realize how loud my will was in that. And I don't beat up on myself for that, in the sense that I didn't understand that. But I think in terms of saying my life is a gift from you, God, and so what would you have for me? That has been a way to more freedom than I used to experience.
Well, that's a great way to end, Wade. Work it out with fear and trembling, right?
Amen to that.
That's
Boy,
a great way.
fear and trembling.
That's right. That's right. But that's all we're called to is to work on it, not to get to the end of it, just to work and just to show up.
Participate. Yeah.
That's right. Participate. Well, Wade, thank you very much. For the audience, I will put all the links in the notes, and I may even put an image or two on the screen that I wasn't able to put during this.
Great.
An image of me with the long Tom Petty hair that I had when I first saw the basics, because I had the long hair. And then I'll put a picture of Haven Road, or a picture of you guys back in the day. I think I saw you at Ponderosa Lodge at Mount Hermon, and I may have been a vocal fan at that age in my life. So
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for taking the time and the effort to talk about this stuff, and to remember, and to be willing to remember with me.
You're welcome. I hope more people find your music, and I'm glad we got a chance to meet. And it's very possible I'll be traveling through North Carolina, and I will look you up.
Oh, yeah. Shoot me an email. Look me up. Let me know. I'd love to meet for coffee or whatever if you come through.
Yeah. All right, Wade.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. This is the end of 5 Great Questions with Wade Baynham, and this is much more than just the basics. And yes, I just made that one up.
Thanks. Good night.
All right.
Walking in harmony. Well, I was holding my own on Tuesday, you know. Wednesday was feeling alright. On Thursday I felt all the cracks giving way, and my anger blew Friday night. But the anger gave way to a numbness in me. It's generally safer than fright, 'cause to look in the mirror and know that I'm scared or hurt, you know that ain't right. Walking in Heartland, down the same streets, walking in Heartland, looking for me. Well, they've labeled my friends and me with an X to mark society's problems today. Say we don't do enough or believe in our work, and have nothing of value to say. Well, I know friends of mine who will speak up alright, and we all have so much to say. But to get back to where the story begins can take more than we can give away. Walking in Heartland, down the same streets, walking in Heartland, looking for me. So a battleground lies in our hearts and our minds. The truth can be so hard to own, but we cannot let all of our woundedness rule all our lives and our blood and our bones. Walking in Heartland.